welcome to this tactical analysis of the Bayern Munich versus Paris Saint-Germain Feminine quarter-final first leg in the UEFA Women's Champions League. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider sharing it on social media and maybe subscribing. With that, let's get right into it. I'm trying to reduce the number of points I discussed during the video, so please have a look in the description as well as comments down below for a full tactical summary. Because the first thing I want to mention is Bayern Munich's preference for long goal kicks. So they have Leipzig in goal rather than Ben Karth, and they're trying to avoid the 3-2-3-2 or 4-1-3-2 press of Paris Saint-Germain. So we can see the Paris Saint-Germain press here. So you've got your back three with your right back pushing into a centre defensive midfield position, looking to try and help out Hamraoui, whilst your other two number 8s are pushed a little bit higher. So you've got Gioro being really high as a second centre forward, whereas your other number 8 in the Brits is playing kind of as a CAM, I guess, in this shape. And then your two wingers are putting pressure towards like the fullback. Bayern Munich opted often to kick long against this pressure, even though I think the Paris Saint-Germain press was a little bit disjointed. Bayern Munich wanted to avoid that risk. They typically built up in like this 2-3 or 2-4 shape deep. So you have your centre-backs in Wenninger and Vigel, and then the fullbacks tended to push a bit higher, sometimes even beyond Kumagai, who was a CDM. And then obviously you've got Magoul, who wanted to kind of float between the lines. She was kind of like a deep line playmaker. Sometimes she would drop to try and provide a short passing option for the defenders and the goalie, the defensive unit, but often she's looking to try and push towards whichever side Bayern Munich are looking to launch the ball to. Often Bayern were looking to try and hit Zadrazil, who's playing almost like a second centre forward. So whilst on paper it's a 4-3-3, but during possession from this deep build-up, Zadrazil is pushing out from her centre midfield position into more of a second centre forward position, and she was the focal point for these long balls. Okay, so whilst we have it set up like this, I think it would also be good to just point out Magoul, who, as I mentioned, liked to start deep, but she was constantly floating. She would come over towards the left-hand side, she would go over towards that right-hand side. Just wherever the ball was, she was looking to try and provide another option and try and support possession in that area, and just allow other people to get up the pitch, with Kumagai being the more disciplined, the one holding her position as a CDM. I would say here early, Kumagai is a little bit of a liability against a team like Paris Saint-Germain in transition, because Paris Saint-Germain have insanely quick players in a number of positions. This right back, Lawrence, is rapid, so she's just a pain, and she was just really nullifying Asai, who instead ended up almost playing as like a second, I guess third centre forward, now that we've got Zadrazil as a centre forward as well. And because of the fact that Bayern Munich were often looking to try and cross the ball from the right hand side through Bull, with Asai wanting to instead come inside and then, you know, be a potential threat from any crosses from Bull. Going back to the rapid players for Paris Saint-Germain, obviously Lawrence, not necessarily involved in counterattacks, but the others. So we're thinking here of Baltimore, Diani, we're thinking of Katoto, even Gioro to a certain degree is quite quick as well. So they just had an insane amount of pace on the counter, and Kumagai just cannot stop that. She is not quick like that. She did help a lot when it came to covering when Bayern Munich were able to drop into a defensive block, but she was a little bit of a liability when Paris Saint-Germain were looking to counterattack. Okay, so here I wanted to show how Paris Saint-Germain's number 8 sought to get into those spaces. At this point, the Brits had to go off due to a head injury, and she was replaced by Diallo, with Diallo kind of occupying the space that Diani would typically occupy. She's similar to the way that Gioro wants to operate as well, actually, in that they want to sit in that space between the fullback and the centre-back, just to occupy the fullback really, and then allow the likes of Diani to be able to pick up a head of steam and kind of just drift past that player who will be obviously worried about that number 8. In this case, Diallo's been able to attract quite a lot of attention. I'd say that part of the reason that she's attracted all that attention, if not the majority of it, is because throughout the game, Diani was just a terror. The yellow cards on that side were really, for Gued and for Asai, were because Diani could just burst past you, and the only way you could take her down was illegally. So they were trying to really, this being Bayern Munich, were trying to clog up that space with a number of players to just prevent Diani from being able to find a path beyond them. I think this is a really good scenario for us to demonstrate Paris Saint-Germain's attack because of the positioning there of the number 8. But then also you see what I mentioned before about Kumagai coming across, covering, trying their best to help the defenders as much as possible. And then you see as the play progresses for Paris Saint-Germain, them looking to try and get those number 8s higher up the pitch. And you've got your fullbacks eventually joining Aton as the ball's progressed into Bayern Munich's defensive third. Another reason why I thought this was quite a good scenario is because it's an example of the kind of back and forth nature of the game. So in this case, it was Bayern Munich counter-attacking, but this being a good scenario for Paris Saint-Germain looking to counter-press. So you see that here with Lawrence, who, as I mentioned, as the play progressed, she had moved up the pitch, puts in a good position to try and counter-press. Finally, the last thing that this scenario shows is Paris Saint-Germain's happiness to just kind of hit it long to Katoto. So from the goalkeeper, Paris Saint-Germain were almost always going long to the goalkeeper. Bayern Munich heavily incentivized them to do that with their 4-2-3-1 press, and the fact that they would press Paris Saint-Germain on passbacks, and Paris Saint-Germain were happy to just rely on the fact that they have blistering pace, and so counterattacks were really an amazing threat for them. So they were happy to just kick the ball long from goalkeeper to Katoto and just see if they could work off that. So we see that here where Kochawi has the ball, excuse me if I butchered her name there, and she will just play it up the line to Katoto, with Katoto looking to try and flick it on to whether it's Baltimore or Diallo or Guerrero are able to try and support as well. There's a difference here between when they hit it up, that being Paris Saint-Germain to Katoto, versus when Bayern Munich were looking to hit the Brits, in that when Bayern Munich did that, they actually could push their fullbacks up as well. So yes, they would initially start up in a 2-3 deep, but the fullbacks could push higher, and due to the 4-1-3-2 or 3-2-3-2 pressing shape of Paris Saint-Germain, there were spaces there either side of Kochawi and maybe Lawrence as the CDMs, where the fullbacks would be able to support the wide midfielders of Bayern Munich. That play broke down from Paris Saint-Germain, where they hit it up to Katoto, and now we've got the 2-3 that I mentioned. So you've got Kumagai as your CDM, you've got Magul as the creative hub of Bayern Munich, looking to drop and just provide a potential out ball, and also, just move around Paris Saint-Germain. In this case, she's drawing Diallo with her. Diallo, who I think during the press, she's got a lot of energy, but I also think because she's got a lot of recovery pace, she can misposition a little bit and then rely on her recovery pace to be able to fix whatever issues come about due to her mispositioning. And then in that 2-3, obviously your fullbacks and your centre-backs backing. When Magul wasn't doing this role of dropping from deep, you also could get that from Schuler and Zadrazil earlier in the game as well. Again, it just allows you to mix it up instead of going long, which will involve some sort of aerial duel and therefore a higher chance of you losing the ball. When those two dropped, these three, Schuler, Zadrazil and Magul, it meant you could retain the ball a little bit better. Paris Saint-Germain are able to kind of rebuff this advance by Bayern Munich, and the ball goes all the way back to Leipzig, who kicks the ball long. By this point, Zadrazil has been subbed off, and you've got Lohman who's come on, and now she's kind of taking up that similar role. So she's almost a second centre forward, but I'd say that she was still playing a little bit more of a number 8 than I'd say Zadrazil was, in that she would drop a lot deeper than Zadrazil did in possession, and she would use just her ability to carry the ball and drive, to be able to drive through the lines of the Paris Saint-Germain. She was really, really good. She brought a lot of impetus and threat to the Bayern Munich attack. I think this is also actually a good example of what we just mentioned before, where we talked about there being space either side of Hamraoui. So you've got Diallo, the other centre midfielder for Paris Saint-Germain at this point, and you've just got a ton of space for Bayern Munich to be able to hit. I believe Hamraoui is just over here, but you get what I was getting at with regards to the amount of space there would be for Bayern Munich over the press. So as mentioned, Lohman here showing exactly what I was talking about with this driving run. She was able to flick the ball onto Bull, who haphazardly retained possession, in that the ball obviously hit Hamraoui there, but it bounced kindly, and Lohman was then able to just drive into all that space. And then with that, you've got Magul following up as well as also your other forwards are looking to try and get in either side and in behind the rest of the Paris Saint-Germain defence. Yeah, I can't state enough just how good Lohman was in creating momentum really for Bayern Munich. She was helped by the fact that Paris Saint-Germain was so happy to just rely on their counter-attacking threat, and then that meant that they were setting back often, and they were looking to hit, whether it was Guerrero, Katoto, maybe Diani, on the counter-attack, which was obviously low efficacy in terms of pass completion. It did eventually mean that Paris Saint-Germain just were not escaping as much as they would really like, and with the amount of potency that you would want with the counter-attacking style. Okay, so Magul was able to get the ball off Lohman on that left-hand side, cut in, tried to receive a ball over the top from Bull. Unfortunately, Paris Saint-Germain were able to deflect that here through Lawrence, and he tries to play it out to Baltimore here on this left-hand side for Paris Saint-Germain, and from here we have our counter-attack. So thing to note here is, where is Diani? She's certainly not in a defensive position. That's because she's just a little bit higher up here on the right hand side. She's not really tracking back as diligently as maybe Baltimore here. But again, if they're able to get the ball back, she will just be unstoppable. You will not catch her. Here, Lawrence is able to get the ball out to Baltimore, and from here we get to see what was mentioned in the notes about Gioro kind of deciding whether the counter-attack should be an actual threat on Bayern Munich's goal, or whether she needs to give the rest of her team a little bit of a rest. Okay, so big note, we've got here Diani. She's not really busting along to get up. She was already up. As mentioned, you've got Gioro looking to try and support Katoto from this Karchawi long pass or clearance. So Gioro's often involved in the counter-attack. Gioro will then decide, dependent on one, the phases of play before and how tired her team is, as well as obviously the opportunity in front of her, whether to continue the counter-attack or not. Relative to other players, I'd say that she did that just because she actually seemed to choose, whereas I kind of felt like other people just went with the flow of the attack, unless Bayern Munich were able to get numbers back or just foul to stop the attack. Whilst we're in this position as well, I think it's good to just point out Kumagai. Later in the game, Kumagai was a lot less disciplined in her position. They were trying to get her higher up the pitch, and she actually set up one of the better chances where she ended up in a crossing position on the right hand side and she cut it back into the centre of the park. She is, as I mentioned, a little bit of a liability at CDM versus a team like Paris Saint-Germain with their pace, but in terms of her passing ability and vision, she's second to none. She's absolute quality. Okay, so with that scenario done, that was the longest one. I think there's just a couple of things to point out. So we've got here the 2-3 deep build-up from Bayern Munich again. We've got Kumagai, so that's CDM, McGould dropping a little bit deeper to provide that shorter passing option through the lines. Okay, so typically Paris Saint-Germain's press was what I mentioned with that 3-2-3-2 or a 4-1-3-2, with Hamraoui being like the anchor to the midfield. Here, Gioro is quite a lot deeper actually than you would typically expect her, because she's meant to be the second centre forward, with the Brits being that CAM. You've got McGould, as mentioned, between the lines, looking to try and provide that shorter passing option, better retention of possession, etc. You've got Zadrazil, your other centre midfielder, higher up the pitch, potential outball if they wanted to go over the press, looking here to drop a little bit and just provide that option just in behind Hamraoui as she goes to try and help the rest of her midfielders with the press. Unfortunately for Hamraoui, who just went up to help, McGould is able to draw out more of the press, and she just plays the ball over the press into Schuler, and then from Schuler we've got runners just in behind that midfield of Paris Saint-Germain. So you've got that in Ball, you've got Zadrazil, and you've got far side with Asayi, and Bayern Munich are just able to try and run at that back line. Eventually that culminates in a cross from Bulls on the right hand side, but it is collected by the goalkeeper. But I think this is a good example of Bayern Munich's deep build-up. Okay, so here we have an example of Bayern Munich pressing Paris Saint-Germain on passbacks. Unfortunately for Paris Saint-Germain, Karchaoui has just taken a throw-in, which is why she's in this position higher up than Baltimore. Baltimore takes the safe option and passes back to her defenders. You've got Hamraoui initially in this. I guess they're meant to be a 2-3, although your left back is way up the pitch here. She's in her CDM position, but as the ball is passed back, she'll try and move into a third centre-back position. Unfortunately, due to the way that the Paris Saint-Germain centre-backs, as well as Hamraoui, position themselves, I think in this situation, probably the biggest culprit being Ilestedt. Her touch into the press reduced the amount of time she had, so that then when she passed it on to Hamraoui, then Hamraoui also had less time. But the point being how aggressive Bayern Munich here were with their press when Paris Saint-Germain were forced into these passbacks. Hamraoui playing the way that she's facing and just getting a bad connection with her passes it into Zadrazil, and from there Zadrazil and the rest of the forwards are just looking to take advantage of the fact that Paris Saint-Germain are extremely exposed. At this point, Paris Saint-Germain are basically 4 or 5 versus 3. You've got your CDM and Hamraoui, and then you've just got your two centre-backs. and everyone else is high up the pitch. Here's your right back and here's your left back. This was really great from Bayern Munich. I think when they pressed, whether it was against Paris Saint-Germain, having throw-ins in their own defensive third, or Bayern Munich having throw-ins in Paris Saint-Germain's defensive third, and the fact that they could then press off whatever happened from the throw-ins, etc. Just basically pressing in any situation in Paris Saint-Germain's defensive third, or where they could force Paris Saint-Germain back. They were excellent. Here we have another example of Paris Saint-Germain number 8. We showed a little one a bit earlier in that super long example in the 68th, 69th minute. Here we have another example. So we've got deep build-up in a 2-3 shape with Hamraoui, being that CDM potential here, pass through the lines versus the 4-2-3-1 press of Bayern Munich. So you've got your 2 and you've got your 3 here with Schuler as your centre forward, and they're just looking to make it as difficult as possible with this 2-3 to be able to pass through the lines. As mentioned, Paris Saint-Germain generally didn't pass through the lines like this and instead looked to go over the Bayern Munich press. What we're really looking for in this scenario is the movement of the number 8s. So you've got Diallo and Guilloro, and how they're going to look to try and eventually occupy the fullback and centre backs and create space for the wide midfielders. So on this occasion, Katoto has floated out towards that left-hand side to allow Baltimore to be able to come inside and potentially threaten from in to out, versus the slower centre-back in Veninger. Glass is able to put enough pressure on Katoto, and Katoto decides to switch and open up the play towards Lawrence and Diani's side, with us now looking at the positioning of those number 8s. So we've got Guilloro, as mentioned, looking to try and occupy the centre-back and full-back of Paris Saint-Germain, with Diallo here looking to try and make a run into that space that the left-hand side of Bayern Munich's defence had kind of vacated. And then you've got here Kumagai, who I mentioned was constantly looking to try and help out her fullbacks and her defence by covering for them. Okay, so another fun way, I think, of Paris Saint-Germain building up was using third player runs. This example actually has 2 of this same kind of build-up. So here, the third player run will come from Guilloro. So Guilloro here passing back to Lawrence, and Paris Saint-Germain look to try and play through the Bayern Munich press. So after a little bit of sharper passing by Lawrence and some dribbling by De Bruyne, we end up with Guilloro making that run kind of like blindside kind of Kumagai, and looking to try and combine here with Katoto. Fortunately for Bayern Munich, they're able to clear the ball there. Vigoustatir, she just kicks it long, and the ball gets out to Karchaoui, the left back for Paris Saint-Germain, and then she looks to provide that impetus from deep. Using third player run here is a little bit inaccurate because it's kind of the 2 of them playing quick combination, so that being Karchaoui and Baltimore. So I'd say that Karchaoui especially is really good at this, at being able to combine with a play, whether it's Hamraoui, Baltimore, maybe Katoto, Guilloro, one of the other players around her, to play quick 1-2s, and she will just burst through your press. It's really, really nice way of getting beyond the opposing team's press. And with that, we've covered everything. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, maybe sharing on social media. And with that,